would you tell? How many enemies would you face?
Lies of P can be a brutally difficult game with its punishing boss fights and common enemies that can completely drain your health in just a few seconds if you're not careful. One combat mechanic that players should lean on to help get through the game's tougher moments is the Legion Arm. Pinocchio's Legion Arm gives him special combat abilities that can be used to great effect to easily dispatch enemies. They're one of the most crucial pieces of creating a character build, so it's worth a player's time to experiment with each one. That said, not all Legion Arms are created equally, and some stand out as much better than the rest. For those looking to know which arms are most useful, here are all 8 Legion Arms in Lies of P, ranked from worst to best. Remember that this list is subjective and that different arms may be better or worse for someone depending on their build and playstyle. Number 8. The Left Arm of Steel. The Left Arm of Steel is the first arm that Geppetto's puppet is equipped with when waking up in Krat Central Station at the beginning of the game. The arm is... well, it's just an arm, and can only be used for melee damage. The damage it deals is relatively solid and can help players stagger enemies. However, it's usually worth it to equip a different arm as soon as you have access to them, since you'll be dealing plenty of melee damage with your other weapons, and the Legion arm is better equipped for filling other roles. Number 7. Deus Ex Machina. Deus Ex Machina lets the player plant landmines that, when triggered, cause an explosion that deals a decent chunk of damage. With upgrades, the player can increase the blast damage and radius, number of mines, and trigger distance. The Legion Arm is, unfortunately, only useful for specific situations where you can kite multiple enemies at the same time towards a choke point. It's an easy way to farm ergo in certain areas, but it's not useful for normal combat since it requires you to slowly put yourself on the defensive during a fight. Number 6. Pandemonium. Pandemonium sprays acid in an arc in front of the player. The good thing is that the acid stays on the ground and deals damage to anyone who steps onto it. If you upgrade the Legion Arm, you can concentrate the acid in a straight line and even make it explode, which gives it some versatility. As far as Legion Arms go, Pandemonium is a decent pick since it's great for mobs, but the major downside is that it's not very useful against most bosses aside from humans. Instead, it's best used against large groups of enemies because you'll be able to deal damage to the entire group at once instead of having to focus on each individual opponent. Number 5. Aegis. Aegis gives the player a shield that they can use to damage any enemy that hits it. If you time it correctly, you can even use it for parries, though that's not a viable strategy most of the time unless you want to learn the timing for 2 different parry windows. Without any upgrades, it's a pretty limiting Legion arm to use since the damage output isn't especially high. However, once you spec into the arm a little bit, Aegis becomes a great pick for dealing with tougher fights with enemies that you're not totally familiar with, since you can deal damage while blocking all incoming attacks and study the enemy's moves. That said, the arm is heavy and not great for boss encounters thanks to how much health most bosses have. Number 4. Puppet String. The puppet string zips smaller enemies towards you and zips you towards larger ones. It's a very simple mechanic, but it works really well, allowing you to quickly close the distance between you and your enemies in a matter of seconds. The puppet string is the first Legion arm you unlock, but it shouldn't be written off as exclusively an early game tool. It's one of the few Legion arms that you can reliably use against bosses because of the helpful last minute dodge option that you unlock after speccing into the arm. Number 3. Full Menace. The Full Menace Legion arm blasts nearby enemies with a jolt of electricity, which is great for dealing damage and building electric blitz, which will deal additional damage over time. When paired with the electric coil stick, you can make an electric blitz build that cuts through most legions of puppets with ease. The Full Menace arm is an incredible asset when dealing with puppets specifically, since they take increased damage from electric weapons and can be helpful for dealing passive damage to bosses, making for easier fights. The only downside is that you need to get pretty close to your enemies in order to zap them. Number 2. Flamberg. Flamberg has the same shtick as Full Menace, except it spits out fire instead of inflicting electrical damage. Flamberg is a very versatile Legion arm that works especially well against human-type enemies as well as any carcass monsters you encounter, since they take increased damage from fire attacks. Like Full Menace, Flamberg pairs well with the Salamander Dagger since they build fire damage and can eventually set enemies on fire. While it's a decent pick for just about all boss encounters, Flamberg is especially useful against Fallen Archbishop Andreas. Number 1. Falcon Eyes. Falcon Eyes is the best Legion arm in Lies of P because it allows players to deal ranged damage to enemies in a game that's severely lacking any other solid ranged options. Falcon Eyes adds a cannon to your arm that shoots exploding bullets that deal solid damage. It's great for boss fights, elite fights, and even normal fights. If you want to use a Legion arm that maximizes damage across all enemies, Falcon Eyes is your safest bet. The only downside to it is that the arm fires very slowly, so you'll need to make sure that you're a safe distance away from your enemies before committing to the attack. And that's our ranking of the best Legion arms in Lies of P. Did we do your favorite arm dirty? Make sure to let me know in the comments down below, and while you're down there, remember to like this video, subscribe to DualShockers, and click the bell icon to be notified whenever we post more Lies of P content.